It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I will tell you that some of us are a little bit tired in getting here today. This marks the end of a long and very eventful week for us that we started actually a week ago on Sunday, celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act. And I hope you got a chance to see some of the pictures on the screen that were scrolling before we started. Welcome to all of those who are online with us today. This is being web streamed out across the state so that our colleagues across the Institute can join in, and we appreciate all of them doing that. This is a particularly important all-hands meeting. If you remember back, this is our fourth one of these. We've had one each semester since January of 2011, and we've talked a lot about planning and strategy and thinking about how we move the Institute forward, what we should be focusing on. We've had this 2025 process that's unfolded that we've talked a lot about in these sessions the last 3 times. And today is really a culmination of that effort. And I'm going to kind of pre-warn you that during the presentation today, we're going to be telling you how we use and implement new resources for the first time in a long time in our history. It's a great day to have that opportunity for that to happen. And what we hope you come out of the end of the day with is a feeling of not only where we are, but also how we got here, a little bit about why we have the resources that we have to deploy currently, how that happened, where they're coming from, as well as how we're going to deploy them. So for a roadmap for our conversation today, we're first going to cover a little bit of talk about what we did here last week and why it was important. I want to spend some time, as we've done in all of these sessions, talking a little bit about what's happening in the outside world around us, and there certainly are some key things there that we need to be paying attention to very carefully, especially this year and going into next year. We'll spend a little bit of time updating on financial status of the Institute and what that outlook looks like moving forward. I want to focus most of our conversation today on how we are positioned within IANR to currently lead the university in terms of growth. We've talked around that a bit the last couple of these all-hands sessions. Today I want to talk about where we really are and why we're able to move forward in this growth, both with the kinds of initiatives that we've been referring to and that are developing kind of in front of us here, as well as how we're going to grow in people, in positions, in physical resources for the Institute. The community topic that we've talked a little bit about, I want to come back and talk more about today. And then a little bit about reach, what our reach is, and what I mean by that, how far out we're reaching in terms of the programs that the Institute is putting into place. We had a huge week last week. You know, we thought it was particularly important to pause and take time to actually devote attention to the Morrill Act. Now, I know that's been an area of emphasis for us here for a long time. It's not new, but this is the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act. And what we were hoping to do through the series of activities that we had last week was draw attention to the fact that we take that very seriously here. And we take the commission that we have under the Morrill Act that formed land-grant universities as central to our purpose and central to who we are and what we do and why we do it. So we wanted to really focus on that in a concerted way. I'll tell you, we spent some money doing it, but I think it was money very well spent, because I think what people got out of that week, both here and nationally, was that we are in fact serious about the Land Grant Act, and we are very serious about being a 21st century land grant university moving forward, and we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Now, there were a tremendous number of people that were involved in forming the plans for that week. They're all up on the screen here, and Lord knows we probably missed some, but I wanted to just stop and pause a minute and thank them for the effort that they put forward. We actually started talking about this back probably toward the end of last calendar year, first of this calendar year, and it was with the associate deans at that point, and with Martin Massengale, who many of you know is the former president of the university. And these folks all got on board to help us plan those activities. So I want you to please just give them a round of applause for all the effort that they put forward. And as you've heard me say before, and you're going to see this peppered through this presentation today, we are a group of servant leaders in this institute. I really believe that what we do is in service to the greater community at large. And we're a public institution in that way. And I can't skip the opportunity here to say that this gal is a miracle worker. And she was largely behind making that week come off with great execution last week. And if you were at the events, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Came off without a hitch. It was wonderful to see the way that Jill gets stuff done and gets it done in a quality way. Those of you that work with her know that. And Jill, we particularly wanted to thank you. And I believe these are for you.
Thank you.
Thanks to my wife to remember to get them. In all seriousness, Jill is fabulous at what she does, and much of the communications and the ability that we've had to ramp up our communications about who we are sits at her feet. So we appreciate very much the efforts that she's had. There are some other role model servants here I want to just take a moment to point out. One of them is this lady up in this frame with our Chancellor, Linda Arnold. She's probably sitting at her desk watching this on video stream. Linda received her 45-year pin this year from the university at the State of the University address. And for all of you that know Linda and the dogmatic way that Linda goes about getting things done, she has been a tremendous asset for this university for a long time. Please give Linda a round of applause for everything that she does for us. Then there are a couple of other kind of special things here. You'll see two pictures there of Jenny Reese in the center bottom and Vaughn Hammond in the upper right, who have been heavily involved with the ag demonstration team groups that have gone to Afghanistan to help equip farmers in that region of the world. Jenny's an extension educator in Clay County in our extension service. Vaughn is in Nebraska City at the Kimmel Center. Vaughn went to Afghanistan, spent a good part of last year. They're working in a part of Afghanistan with farmers, and Jenny has worked in training those teams, including the one that her husband has served on through the reserves. And they were recognized by the Board of Regents this past month for the efforts that they've done. And then you'll recognize the guy down in the bottom corner over here, Alan Moeller, who finished yesterday his service as interim dean of extension of UNL Extension for the past couple of months. Did a fabulous job, and you're going to see a little bit of that effort here in a moment. Thank you, Alan. And then, of course, many of you knew Bill Splinter, a giant here at the university for many, many years. His funeral services were this morning. He was 86 years old, member of the National Academy of Engineering, was the head of our biological systems engineering today, ag engineering in his day program. Huge giant on this campus that we'll all miss. So these are the kind of role model servants. There's we could point to many in the Institute, but just a few examples here of people that have made an extraordinary difference. All right, let's pay attention to the outside world a little bit here. There's some big things going on around us as we speak. The economy, we're all watching to see if it finds its feet globally. It still hasn't, and we're still looking to see how that will play out over time, particularly relative to Europe and the European community. Our state and local economy continues to be very good relative to the greater picture around us, heavily agriculturally based, as I'll talk about here in a few slides. The federal situation's a little bit uncertain, more probably than a little bit. It's a lot uncertain at the moment, where we have this fiscal cliff ahead of us, the whole sequestration issue that's out there. We don't have a farm bill. We're in an election. We don't know how the election's going to go. So there's a lot of uncertainty at the federal level. of what might happen. The Arab Spring that we observed a couple of years ago now is kind of in a second phase and could go into a deeper second phase if we are paying attention to what might be out ahead. And then certainly this year, in what some have labeled the year of the flash drought, has changed things dramatically for us across the country and here at home in Nebraska compared to what we were thinking in February. Remember, in February, it was all optimism. We'd had one of the wettest years on record, and then now here we are in October when we're the driest year on record in many respects. So we have a lot of things happening to us around us. This drought is serious, and we need to be assured that we all realize how serious that it is. These are pictures from the Platte that Mike Forsberg and Mike Farrell have been working on in the Platte River Time-Lapse Project that we're working with them. And you can kind of see the progression of what's happened over the last several months. This would go out to about June, I believe, early June, with the Platte just this year. Our National Drought Mitigation Center has been front and center throughout the summer in talking with the media and in thinking about what this drought means, what its long-term impacts may be, and what we might be able to do to predict it. One of the driest years on record, particularly for us here right in the center of the country, one of the hottest years on record, as you all know, across a wide swath of the United States. So we have an issue here that we don't know what the other side's going to look like, to be real frank. We don't know how long this drought may last. We hope that it doesn't last long, but the signals are not good so far. So we're all very concerned about what that will mean. I want to particularly applaud the folks in the Institute who have been front and center on this. I've already mentioned the Drought Mitigation Center, the High Plains Regional Climate Center, who have worked tirelessly through the summer around the drought. The UNL Extension Service put together a drought team early in July to bring together resources as best they could to help people in the field mitigate the drought, think about coming out of the drought if it breaks, planning around the drought, and they worked hard to do that in a tireless way. If you were at the lecture on Friday night, you would have heard Senator Johans refer a couple of times during that conversation to how impressed he was with the briefings that he received by our drought team here on campus. So they've done yeoman's work. Here's that group. And I probably, again, may have missed a few, but leadership from throughout the Institute who have been involved on the front lines of working on this, and their work obviously is far from over. So please thank them for the efforts that they put forward. Now here's what's a little bit screwy about this. Remember last February I talked about the record year we came off of in 2011 relative to the ag economy in the state, and it was a record year. Well, I found out from Bruce Johnson just a couple of days ago, the ERS came out with their data now, and the estimates from what we had been seeing before were lower than ERS's estimates are for what they think happened in the state. $7.5 billion in net farm income. The earlier estimates had been 5.4. So we obviously had a record year, however you measure it, for agriculture in 2011 in Nebraska. Now, we don't know what the impact of this drought will be yet. We're partway through, probably toward the tail end now because of the drought harvest season. Irrigated yields have exceeded what some may have thought. Dryland yields obviously were not very good. The situation has turned south for our livestock producers in many regards. A lot of feed went south last year, and a lot of cows came north from the drought in Texas, and now we're on the wrong end of that, if you will, looking out ahead. So there's concern here in terms of what the economic impact of the drought may be. Yet, we also are getting predictions that we still expect $5 billion in net farm income in Nebraska this year, even under the conditions of the drought, which is about $1 billion more than the previous record according to ERS data before last year, before the record year we had last year. So we're fortunate, but we've used a lot of resources, as we all know, to get there in terms of the water use this year in particular. So we're all kind of waiting to see, if you will, how this plays out. Now I've got this in here for a little bit of personal interest. My son just went to work for this guy about a month ago in Washington, D.C. He's a political commentary writer, and I found him writing on the drought in the New York Times. And he's talking about linking this now forward globally, you know, the whole discussion about food prices and effect of drought on long-term impacts around the globe. What's it going to mean to the food supply next year? Another big uncertainty, if you will, at this point in time. I mentioned this earlier. Last year was a wild record for us. We are a beneficiary of that. I want to make sure we understand that. It helps our budget too, when ag is in such a good condition in the state. And it was a record year. It also is important to reiterate the point we made last February about generational turnover of land in the state projected for the next era of time. And it's huge at this point. Absolutely huge, the amount of land that's going to turn over, and the value currently of that land on the market is quite high. This is that graph of net farm income over the last several years. We're obviously in a spike there at the end of that. Relative to last year, we'll see what the next year looks like. So all of that collectively is a way of saying that we're at a point where we really can grow. Given the uncertainty of the drought, we're still at a collective point that we're benefiting from that as we talk about moving forward in the Institute. Now, I want to build this picture for you so that you understand where we are and understand where these resources are coming from. I've had a lot of people asking me questions about, you know, how are we going to be able to increase faculty lines by 30 faculty or 35 faculty when the rest of the university is not in that position? When Harvey's talking about cutting slight cuts in the budget. How's that work? So I want to make sure we understand that today. And we understand where the resources are, where they come from, and why we're in the position that we are. This is our budget this current fiscal year in the Institute. Institute-wide, across IANR, $192.4 million. And the sources of where that revenue comes from are shown there. So we're about 45% state appropriated. Comes from the state legislature. A very small percentage comes from the federal government, formula funds. So Hatch funds, Smith-Lever funds that help fund the experiment station and extension. Sales and services, you know, our farming operations are part of that, 19.5% of our budget. Restricted revenue, including foundation funds, so funds that we're able to use and bring over from the foundation to support our programs, are included in that restricted revenue, about a quarter of our budget in that bucket. Tuition, you know, 7% of our revenue comes in as tuition dollars, and then a very tiny little bit down there at the end that we recoup in terms of indirect costs in F&A through the university. So 192 million, I want you to remember that. We'll come back to that here in a few slides when we talk about positions. Where are we on state funding? We're going into a biennium in January, so we're going into a budget setting session of the legislature for the next 2 years of our budget. We had hoped before this drought that this might be the year we actually turned the corner and we might have gotten an increase. I don't know what that's going to look like now. I hope we can maintain, I think we will, aside from a little bit of politics that's going on at the moment. I hope that we'll be able to maintain our budget. I'm still hopeful we might be able to get a slight increase in our budget from the state in that biennium. You have heard Harvey say at the university level that we've got about 0.5% budget shortfall in the current fiscal year. That's true, we do. And he has allocated that out to the divisions. Our share of that's about $530,000 for the year, and we'll be handling that with the units. We're not going to make cuts. We're not going to make permanent cuts. We're going to do one-time savings to save that. And it's not, I don't want to say $535,000 isn't a big deal. It is, but it's not a big deal in the bigger picture of things. And we think we're going to be able to handle that just fine. We do have the situation where the state has built some cash reserves because tax receipts have been ahead of revenue projections. We'll see how that plays out now going into the end of the harvest year. And as I mentioned already, the state budget will be set in the next legislative session. External funding, great success story last year. End of the year, June 30th, 2012, for the previous fiscal year, we were up 12% in the Institute in research expenditures. We were up 20% in external grants and contracts. We led the university in that regard, across the university, in increase in external grants and contracts. So a very good year that we're coming off of in terms of our research funding from external sources. The legislature last spring did allocate to us the opportunity to build a new veterinary diagnostic lab. They allocated up to $50 million in bond financing that we could access if we raised $5 million in private funding first. And some of you may have seen this little deal. You know, there's a little bit of debate occurring currently in our state about taxes and use of tax dollars for this Building a Healthier Nebraska initiative around the Cancer Center in Omaha, and the cigarette tax proposal and the inheritance tax proposal in Douglas County to help fund that. My boss did not particularly find this funny. He asked me what I thought of it. I told him I thought it was creative. But at any rate, my point in showing that to you isn't to make jest here. My point is that it means we're going to have to raise this money privately. We're not going to be able to go to a taxing authority and ask for additional funds privately to raise those $5 million, which is a big hill to climb. Raising $5 million in the veterinary community is not too different than raising $50 to $100 million in the human medical community. So it is a big task. We're up to it. We're going to do it. And we're going to hopefully have good progress made on that with the help of the foundation by the start of the legislative session. We have enlisted the help of the Nebraska Veterinary Medical Association. They are being a lead organization for us in networking with the veterinary community and with the livestock and other animal industries to help us to try to raise those funds. So we're looking forward to that happening. I did agree to match those funds. So for every dollar that's raised, the Institute would match those dollars in order to try to get this done and get it underway. So we're excited about that opportunity. This is critically important for our veterinary sciences program. We can't have a great 2+2 program if we don't have a great veterinary diagnostic lab and the things that come with that, in addition, of course, to the purpose it serves for the state. So we're excited about that opportunity, and we're looking forward to moving it forward. The new University of Nebraska Foundation is at an interesting and pivotal point. This young man joined us as the new CEO of the University Foundation last week. He came from Ohio State. His name is Brian Hastings. I've had the opportunity to spend a fair amount of time with Brian already, and I'll be spending more time with him this month. I really like him. I really, really like him. And I think he's going to be a huge asset for the university in helping to raise the kind of funds that we think need to undergird our programs. I'm very excited about where we are. You'll see there that the capital campaign that we've talked about is a $1.2 billion campaign. It's now in what, year 6? 7? It has exceeded its goal. You'll see I've got it denoted that way. It's greater than $1.2 billion that is raised currently. And our goal was $49.4 million. When you put everything together that has been raised around agriculture, including Water for Food, including the Angler program, including some of the relationships we have with private companies, that number is now over $100 million. And that's something to be really proud of. When you start doing the math there, what that means is we're bringing in significant foundation dollars to undergird our programs and replacing some of what we've had to rely on before in order to do that. So it's exciting to see that happening. I still believe that we've got to do double that plus in order to really be where we need to be in funding lines to be able to do the things that we hope to do. Now, all of that said, with the initiatives that we have going on and where we are positioned in those, you know, I've said it, you've heard me say it, I believe it wholeheartedly, we should be the epicenter of the world in this area. And I believe that. I know it's a big statement. I know it's audacious to say that. Some might say it's a little arrogant, and I don't intend it to be. But there is no reason that we should not be the epicenter of this area, given where we are, given the prosperity that the state has at the moment, and given what the issues are for our state out ahead. So we believe that. And these opportunities, I think, are ahead of us in a way that we'll see that happen. You've seen this before. I'm just going to quickly update you on these huge, big key initiatives for the university and some things that have happened in them since February. Water for Food, you've heard a lot about that. We continue to develop it. We did bring on leadership in the past 6 months to help lead the Institute in its first developmental phases. This is what's happened in terms of agreements for Water for Food around the world in those first 2 years. And it continues to add. I added another line to this over the weekend, the Global Harvest Initiative line at the bottom. Margaret Ziegler, who is the CEO of that group, was here this weekend, was part of our activities on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, wants to work with the Water for Food Institute. Global Harvest Initiative includes John Deere, includes ADM, includes IBM, includes Elanco, includes DuPont, includes Monsanto. They want to work with the Water for Food Institute. So we continue to see this build and grow. I will tell you, if there's something I'm worried about in Water for Food, I'm just being real honest with you here, is the amount of things that we have ahead of us in order to address them in a quality way. There's a lot on that page, in addition to what we already do in terms of emphasis on water in Nebraska and in our own backyard. So that's an area that these folks are going to grapple with. Roberto Linton, our new executive director, he's been here since February in a part-time role. He's now full-time. He's finished his World Bank role that he was in previously and is fully engaged. He brought in Monica Norby, who many of you know, had been in the Vice Chancellor for Research and Economic Development's office, heavily involved from the very beginning with Water for Food as his associate director. Swat Ermach, we talked about in February, had just taken on the interim role for the Nebraska Water Center that is now part of the Water for Food Institute. We have a search that's coming to a head on that position as we speak, where we're screening candidates for the permanent director. And then Roberto has just launched his search for a director of research and a director of policy, both positions that we will share, that will have their foot in IANR and their tenure homes in IANR. So we're keenly interested in who they bring into those roles. Some of you will have seen last week, we launched a new institute across the university system called the Rural Futures Institute that we've been developing now for the last 2 years. And we're very excited about that. It is early days. We had a conference in May with about 500 people here from around the country and around the globe, helping us engage in a discussion about what that institute should be and how it should be formed. It was very successful, 29 states, 12 other land-grant universities were here involved as partners in that discussion, along with the UK and Australia and Canada around the world. So we were very pleased with that discussion. These are some of the screenshots from that conference where we were challenged to think about what this institute could be like. And last Thursday we launched it formally. It'll receive board approval formally on October the 26th this month. It will start with about a $2.5 million annual budget from resources that we've been able to pull together that we already have, in some cases reallocated, to this effort across all of the campuses of the university system. By default, IANR has to be a key player in this. By default, we are a key player in it, given our mission and our scope. And I'm looking forward to launching the search for an executive director for this as soon as we have the board approval in place on October the 26th. Innovation Campus, lots of questions around this. We had a good discussion on Tuesday with the life sciences faculty, or many of our life sciences faculty, and there's a lot of questions about the when and the what and the who, if you will, of Innovation Campus. And I'm sure Dan's, yeah, there he is. He's sitting over there in the back. I see your head, Dan. It's kind of shining over it. Yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't be that bad. But Dan's been working really hard since assuming that role last October, or at least part-time October. Now he's full-time, trying to get the legals done for Innovation Campus, which are exceedingly complex. to get all of the legals done with the city, with the developers, and the infrastructure in place. We signed off on all of those in the last 3 weeks. We're through that phase. I saw the developer, Zach Wigard, last night in Omaha, and he feels very good about where we are. The next step is the announcement of the groundbreaking and the first partner. We actually had hoped to do that this past week, and we were close to being able to do that with that partner. We decided not to do that. The partner wasn't ready to do that, primarily because the CEO couldn't be here last week. But we do have the date set for that for November the 16th. So we will groundbreak, we will announce that first big partner, and it is a big one, and it's right in our space that will launch, we think, the domino effect at Innovation Campus. And we have a lot of thinking to do, though, about the who's going to be there. Because we know that we want to have faculty present on Innovation Campus and linked to the activities that will be on Innovation Campus strategically. We've got to think our way through that, because you know if we take faculty out of departments and we pluck them down in another place, that model might not work. It might not be good for the departments, it might not be good for the faculty members. So we've got thinking to do there about how we position that as we move forward, and we'll start doing that once that groundbreaking is done in November. And you've seen that slide before, so I'll leave it up there long enough for you to guess. There we go. Global engagement. We are very pleased that Mark Doyle, the gentleman that you see in the slide here, will join us on November the 1st as our first International Director of Global Engagement for IANR. There was a little pull and tug with the university on this, I'll tell you just outright, because we're trying to figure out what to do as a greater university in this arena. It's one of JB's agenda items as president of the university system, and it's been a budget cut in the past, right? So we've had international programs, we've cut international programs, we've brought international programs back, we've cut international programs. I think we've been back and forth on that a couple of times, and most recently a cut, quite frankly. But you can't look at what we're trying to do, just even the Water for Food work up there, and think about how we're going to do that strategically and meet the needs of our students strategically on international programs and globalization, and not have a point person. I firmly believe that. So we went out, we looked hard, we had a very deep pool, 40-some candidates for this position. He was our top pick, and we were very pleased to get him. He's coming from Indonesia, where he currently is stationed with USAID. He has a PhD in plant biotechnology from Wisconsin-Madison. He comes very well trained, and we are exceedingly pleased that Mark's going to be joining us November 1st. Liana Caligari, who also has a PhD in ruminant nutrition in her case, has been working with us since January, since January of last year, with Brazilian students who are part of the Science Without Borders program here on campus. She is from Brazil. She has her PhD from the University of Sao Paulo, ESOC, who we now have a partnership with, and she's been a huge asset for us in working with these students and getting students acclimated to our campus. She will now be full-time as we build that program forward and will be part of Mark's office. So we're very excited about them joining us. And you know, these kind of opportunities that we are building around the world require that kind of strategy, and we're looking forward to having them here. Mark's office will be up on the top floor of Ag Hall when he gets here in a few weeks. We opened an office in Beijing in the State Administration for Grain in June. We did that jointly with the Nebraska Department of Agriculture. And we are strategizing how to best network our work in China through that agency. We're pretty unique to have an office inside a Chinese government ministry to be working effectively with Chinese universities. So I'll go back with Mark in November for us to set the next stage of that work. All right, now let's get into this growth story. So I would guess that the vast majority of you who came today and are listening are here to hear what the positions are. Am I right? Yeah. So I want to kind of lay this story for you, and I want to make sure you understand these are funded positions. We're not borrowing from the future. I've had several deans on campus say, "How are you doing this? Are you mortgaging your future, or are you borrowing the money?" I want you to understand we have these positions funded. So we're going to walk through that a little bit first, and then we'll get to what the positions actually are. This is who we are today, people-wise. So we are at 1615. That's the exact number Jeff Bassford tells me. 1,230 of those people are here on campus in the greater sense, 385 outstate, 600 total faculty, where about 385 of those faculty are tenure-track faculty lines. Now, I want you to remember that number, because as we talk about the growth in tenure-track faculty, it's based on that 385 number, okay? So that's who we are today. We're adding leadership to those. I am extremely excited today to have this gentleman who is sitting over right here join us. It's his first day on the job as the Dean and Director of UNL Extension. I know many of you know Chuck from when he was the director out at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center in Scottsbluff for a number of years, has been the Dean and Director at Purdue, Associate Dean and Director of Extension at Purdue University for the last several years. He's going to bring tremendous leadership, we think, to Extension, and we're excited about that. In fact, I think I might just let him do this all-hands presentation in the next meeting to tell you about what he thinks about growing Extension and the need to grow Extension as we move forward. Mark Riley will join us as the head of the Biological Systems Engineering Department on October the 15th, coming from the University of Arizona. He was our top pick for that position. And I'm going to be real open with you about this. Brian Larkins is sitting in the audience. He was recently a part of the faculty in Tucson. There's a dynamic that's out there currently where the market is good to hire people. If you're hiring and you've got a good story to tell, there is a dynamic that is good for us right now. It's not so great, Brian, in Tucson, unfortunately, and Brian's talked with people about that since he got here in July. We were able to get Mark as a result of that. Great talent that we're able to bring in. He was a department head there at the University of Arizona, coming in with that experience, and we're looking forward to him joining us. Rock Gasson, a little tearful goodbye at Backyard Farmer the other night for Rock, but he's now the permanent head of the Department of Agronomy and Horticulture. After serving in that role for a year, was overwhelmingly the choice of the faculty for that position and overwhelmingly supported by the faculty to go into that role permanently. So Rock, thank you and welcome into that role permanently. Tala Awada, over here on my right, went into the position as interim director of the School of Natural Resources in early August. And has been the associate director for a while in that position previously, and is providing leadership for the school. Don Wilhite has stepped back into the faculty. I think many of you knew he had planned to do that and concentrate back on his area of expertise. So Tala is leading that effort, and we appreciate Tala's efforts. We need to get a new director hired, and we've challenged the department, the school in this case, to make that happen. New faculty. We have 26 new faculty who joined us this fall in the new school year across extension educators and tenure-track faculty lines. We're very pleased to have these folks with us and to join the team and moving us forward. So we have new people here to integrate into our culture and integrate in successfully, we hope, and we look forward to great things from all of them. And you'll see there are a few that are unusual in there, like that College of Law one that's a joint faculty with the College of Law and the Institute in Jessica Shoemaker's place. I talked a little bit about that, I believe, in February. We currently are recruiting these leadership positions. So what I'm trying to do here now is show you what we're recruiting in terms of faculty, what are open lines. We have the Natural Resources School Director I just mentioned that we're actively recruiting. We hope we're close to the end of a recruiting on the statistics chair. I know Steve Kochman and Kathy Hanford certainly are hopeful that we're close to the end of that process. And attached to that were two faculty lines, one in Arts and Sciences and one in IANR, that would come with that position after we get that chair in place. The Water Center Director I've already mentioned. We're in the end of that, or the screening part of that search, I guess now, and the two directors within the Dougherty Water for Food Institute. Here are the open faculty lines that we have open currently. And you'll see that collectively with those previous positions I mentioned, the leadership positions, there are a total of 19 open searches in total FTE or full-time equivalent basis across those. Some of these are in the advanced stages of the process, some are in the early stages of the process, but there are 19 lines that have been released or out there, are being searched for, and have been funded previously by the Institute. Looking forward, and particularly in those last few, to getting those done. They've been on the market for a while. Here's our goals to remind us. Everybody should be able to recite these, right? 5,000, oops, it's 5,700 more students because we're down a few this beginning of the school year. So we want 30,000 students at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln by 2017. You heard Harvey talk about that eloquently in his State of the University address. I won't rehash that ground that he's already talked about. Adding tenure-track faculty lines, that's the basis of much of what we're talking about here today, to help fuel that growth and to respond to that growth for students. Graduation rates to increase. We slipped a little last year. We had been trending up. We had gone to about 64.5% on 6-year graduation rates. We slipped back down just under 64% this past year. That was expected because there was a year of students where the retention was low. And that was the year that we've caught now, according to the data moguls that tell us that. So we've got ground to move up here. Kasner currently is 78%. So we're continuing to trend up and lead the university in that statistic. Research expenditures, we started at $191 million when Harvey had this goal a year ago. For 5 years out, being at $300 million, we're at $235 currently this past fiscal year, and I'll show you some data here in a moment that indicate we're well ahead of our projection for the Institute. And Innovation Campus, we've already mentioned, being complete within Phase 1 being complete in the next 5 years. Now here's a little different cut of that budget before we get into faculty lines that I wanted to show you. Now this is where the money actually goes. Okay, so I showed you where it came from earlier. Now this is where we spend it. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist here to figure out that most of that is in people. In faculty lines, in staff support lines, in clerical lines, in operating our business with the human capital that we have. We don't have a lot in operating when you get down to the very bottom, proportionally. The vast majority of our budget is in people. But again, that $192 million there to remember. This is how that's changed over the last 10 years. I thought you should see this. Our budget hasn't gone down in the last 10 years. Our budget's gone up, and it continues to go up. You know, one of the things that I think we have to guard ourselves from doing sometimes is thinking we don't have a lot, because we do. We have a lot. We have a lot of resource here to be able to deploy and use for the people that invest in what we do. So it's important to recognize, I think, that the last few years, if you look out from 2003 now, almost 10 years ago, we've gone up over $50 million in that budget. And that's a combination. That's while state resources have been declining, obviously, but it's been in funding for research, it's been in tuition from students, it's been in foundation revenue to put around our programs, and it's been from our ag operations, frankly, that have also helped us to go up. So this is a good story. Our resources are, you know, we always want more. I always want to, you know, this is a little bit of danger and slippery slope here of saying to the legislature we got a lot, but the fact of the matter is we have a lot of resources to deploy and use for the people of the state and beyond. Student enrollment growth, these are the goals. I showed them to you before. I won't dwell on this slide. I'll come back later. Here's where we are. Draw your attention to this bottom line, 2012 for Kasner. We were 3.7% up this fall in student enrollment, primarily undergraduates. We're flat in the graduate category, up a little bit, or about flat, I guess, with last year on professional program students. So collectively, total student numbers were up 3.7%. That's 9 years of consecutive growth, and that tuition growth has funneled part of what we're releasing today. I'm just going to be point blank with you about that. Much of the reason we have more positions to release is we've accumulated the ability to do that with increased tuition revenue from our students. I gave you this also in February. By major, some goals to shoot at. Some opportunity for where we thought student enrollment could be by major. There were some big success stories this fall. Agronomy, up 30 students from 140 to 170 students in agronomy this fall. It's a huge success story for them. Animal science continues to be up. Ag economics, ag business continues to be up. You can see the data. And percentage-wise, proportionally, we're not doing too bad on those growth goals, realizing we got a lot of ground to cover yet in order to get where we're going. One thing I continually hear from people in the state, I shared this on this same venue in February, is we've got to amp up our recruiting efforts in the state of Nebraska. I continue to hear that. We've got to do that. The university is investing in doing that. If you're following kind of what's happening, Ellen Weisinger is leading an effort. I applaud Ellen for doing this. She's got her head down and focused on trying to increase our recruiting efforts across the campus with new advertising, with student-relevant advertising, with getting out in the state and in the areas of Nebraska better than we've done in the past, engaging our extension faculty better in particular. And I'm looking forward to Chuck really helping to lead that and further develop that with our recruiting efforts. So I don't think these are unrealistic goals that we have ahead of us. Steve put these proportionally in numbers. So on the total, we're at 75% of goal, if you want to think of it that way, roughly the same on undergraduate numbers, slightly less than that in graduate numbers. NCTA, part of the Institute, our two-year College of Technical Agriculture at Curtis. Weldon Slight's retiring the end of December this calendar year. It's going to take some time for us to replace somebody like him. He's done a tremendous job for us at Curtis. He's got, I'll say it, Weldon's probably online. He is not wanting to retire. He has some health issues in his family that he needs to retire to help with a daughter and an aged mother. So we're going to miss Weldon tremendously in that position. And he's going to have huge shoes to fill. We have capacity there for 600 students. We're at 335 today. Another recruiting challenge that we're going to need to invest in to best use that resource. Now I'm going to cut ahead to the position slides. I see people beginning to get anxious. Here's that research story. I showed you this slide in February. I think I may have first showed it to you last September, in fact, saying that if we were going to meet the research goal of $300 million in research expenditures at the university, and we maintained our share of that in IANR, which it was about 30%, that we had to grow at these rates, compounded growth rates for research annually, and that's what our record had been. Here's our current number. So here's where we were at the end of June. We're at $91.7 million in research expenditures in the Institute. We make up 39% of the university's research expenditures. So if you go on those goals, we're almost there. Now, with that said, we also are leading the university. So the pressure also is on us to help the university achieve its overall goal. And I think we're going to far exceed our goal in helping achieve that $300 million that's there. It's a huge success story. And I applaud all of our folks for what they have done to make that happen in the past year. Huge success. We continue to see grants come in. This is just a smattering of those over the $500,000 range since we met last time, or ones that were in process last time. So we continue to see people have success in generating funds for the research. And we are particularly pleased at things like the Ag Policy Group that didn't think that they might have a great chance in this and ended up being one of the very few chosen as a new Ag Policy Center grant in a very expedited frame. Is that true, Lillian? In a very expedited frame this past spring. So congratulations to them, and we're looking forward to great things coming forward. Okay, here's where we are, positions. So I'm going to walk through with you now what has come out of our planning process, and I want you to remember where the money's coming from. You've seen that. Where the growth has been fueled by, you're seeing that. What we started out to do was to determine for tenure-track faculty lines how much we could grow the Institute in phase one of this 5-year growth period. So in phase one, we're thinking next 18 months, today out 18 months ahead. What could we fund? And I will tell you that even during last week, the deans and I were locked in the Morrill Hall conference room till 10 o'clock Wednesday night last week, hashing this out. And what we're going to release to you today is 36 positions. We have resources to fund 36 new positions. These are not turning over of positions. If you go back to where we were in 2010 and you forward to where we are in 2012, we have filled about the same number of positions we vacated. So we're about dead even. 21.9 and 22, I think is the number. We're about dead even in terms of positions. So these are new tenure track faculty lines that we're funding, and I want to draw the line under that. We've been through an exhaustive process. Many of you in the room and on the web have been part of that process, where we asked the units, we asked the departments across the Institute, we asked the districts in the research and extension centers to come forward with plans and ideas for what they thought priorities should be. We did that early after this same session last February. We went through a submission process of that. There was an iteration back and forth a couple of times with faculty and unit heads to do that. Culminated in us meeting as a leadership team in July for a couple of days to sort through those priorities. We came out of that retreat with a head group of 3 or 4 of these priorities I'll show you today. And then they've been working since then to prioritize positions within those priorities. So the result of what you're seeing here today is that process that started from the ground up. And I want to applaud our leadership for that. That was not an easy thing to do, because the way we've done it before, historically, a position comes open, it goes back in the black box, and departments might, queue up for what they think they wanted back out of that black box, and the Dean's Council would spit something back out, right? Let me be more professional about that. The Dean's Council would prioritize the resources they had, and you'd get positions back as they became available, right? That was the process. And what we decided well over a year ago was we needed to change that process. We needed to have the departments at the table. We needed to have the unit heads at the table. We needed to have the district directors at the table. We needed to involve center directors to the extent we could within that mix to talk about what these positions should be. And I really want to applaud them because they've worked hard. It has not been easy to do that. Faculties have worked hard in this process, and I want to thank you for that before we tell you the results. So give yourself a pat on the back. We do appreciate it very, very much, and we hope that that process has been beneficial for all of us long term. Here are the groups of positions. I said there are 36 of them. I will go through the areas. There were a number of core areas that were identified as priorities in meeting the goals that we think we have ahead of us. This first one is in the area of stress biology. Lord knows, a year like we've had this year can show you the need for that. And what we're talking about here is stress in the environment of plants, stress in the environment of animals, stress of our natural resource systems, in ways that we coalesce our research around how can we better handle stressful environments that may increase in the future. That's the whole premise of this area, and one that we felt very strongly about. And you can see there are 6 positions, if I remember correctly there, that have been prioritized in that group for release in these first 36. I want to applaud Gary Brewer for this, because Gary came to that unit heads group with the idea of stress biology after the unit head stuff had been submitted back earlier in that process this spring, and had the idea that we should coalesce some resources together like this. He's been talking about it for longer than that, I know, on campus. And this group did a very nice job, I think, of identifying ways that we should invest in the positions that you see before you there. So we're very pleased about that group. You will see on each of these slides, there is an indication of the number of positions that have been identified for phase 2. So in this case, you'll see 3 positions that came out of that process that get categorized into this group that are on hold for release 18 months from now. So in phase 2 of our growth, if you will, and the way we're thinking about it. So we looked at the whole picture and figured out what would come next. Right, does that make sense? As we could best predict it today. The next category, and there are 2 slides of these, are what we're calling healthy systems for agricultural production and natural resources. This first group is in the beef systems area, forage systems area, across multiple departments. I should have said before I showed you that first group, I'm not showing you which departments these are in, because that's to be decided yet, where these positions best fit, and whether we might have multiple departmental appointments in some of these positions as we move forward. So this group of beef systems, this is an area that is of extreme importance in this state. I don't say that just because I'm a beef guy. You know, we're the #1 red meat state in this country, and we need to invest in that industry and supporting that industry moving forward, especially under some of the challenges that lie ahead for that industry. Here is the second set of those healthy agricultural and natural resource systems positions. There are two groups of them, an agroecosystems group. I will tell you that I could have just as have equally put those three positions in stress biology. There are as many arguments for them fitting there as there is for them fitting here. But Ron told me that I needed to balance them out, so I put them here. But you know, those positions also fit that stress biology category quite well, quite frankly. One dealing with insecticides and the other dealing with herbicides heavily in those first two positions, and one dealing heavily with carbon sequestration and greenhouse gas emissions. So we're very pleased about those three positions. High Plains Ag Systems, these are positions that most likely will be placed at Panhandle, at the Panhandle Research and Extension Center, where the needs in that part of the state exceed our ability to address them. And with particularly some recent departures that we've had there in addressing High Plains Ag Systems, and you can see what those three positions are. And that group, I should have said, there will be 7 positions that we have characterized as phase 2 in that healthy ag and natural resource systems cluster of expertise. Healthy humans. This deals with the food for health, if you want to think of it that way, area of what we've talked about the last couple of years. There are 6 here, I think, as well, if I remember correctly, 6 positions that are categorized in that group. Across, again, multiple departments and areas of emphasis in the Institute. Within phase 2, the expectation there are 5 positions that were identified as critical to augment these in that second phase of development as we move forward. This one is an area that's received a huge amount of discussion, debate, and attention, both within the life sciences and the natural resources arenas, where we know we have ability to generate huge volumes of data now from so many different exciting technologies, but our ability to mine and use those data is limited by our expertise of figuring out what to do with it, right? So whether it's bioinformatics or whether it's remote sensing or whether it's any variety of things that are out there. We spent a lot of time talking about this at the retreat in July and how to categorize these, because the university had been in a discussion about bioinformatics, and we need to hire bioinformatics people in the life sciences, and we need to invest in these areas. And a lot of stops and starts, and nothing had really happened there. Those of you at the life sciences retreat Tuesday will remember Archie talking about that. I want to show you a slide of that here in a minute. So we want to invest 3 of these positions in this area. We're not saying that they will, each one of them, be in one of those 3 that are listed. It could be we'll hire multiple ones. In the early days, we'll hire 3 more in the next phase. I can even anticipate there would be 3 beyond that we would need to flesh out our abilities in these areas. So we're excited about that. It will fit within the greater rubric of the university in this area. This is the slide Archie showed last Tuesday, where he's talking about within the greater system, these positions we're talking about being right there, academic tenure track lines in these areas, augmented hopefully by some additional expertise in arts and sciences, maybe engineering and computer science as well. And then those positions already mentioned to you in the statistics department, the chair and the 2 faculty lines attached to that augment this as well. We have a POE, a program of excellence, that was funded last year by the university that will help support all of this. About a $500,000 permanent line that will have some hiring here, some hiring likely here, and some help there in that story. So we feel good about hopefully coming to a head to move this forward as we move forward. The last category here in priority areas is in agricultural science literacy. And we've spent a lot of time talking about this, the need for enhancing our ability to understand the food system, the natural resource system that supports the food system, and have literacy of science, if you will, associated with that. The Life Sciences group has put forward an undergraduate curriculum. Tiffany's been heavily involved in that with John Osterman from the School of Biological Sciences. That first position would be heavily involved with that effort, with the Life 101 courses that we've laid out and have now gone through the curriculum approval process, along with 2 other positions that will be part of that cluster. In phase 2, we expect to hire an additional 4 positions in this area that are subject matter expertise in their basis. That'll be down in particular areas of subject matter around the science literacy arena. We also knew that there were some core needs in the Institute that we had to also fund. These are priority areas, but there are some core areas that we need to pay attention to that turn over. We have people that retire, people that leave, that we need to make sure we're resourced across the areas that we need to cover. We couldn't fund all of them. I will tell you, we had about around 50 positions, I'd say, we started from to get to these 36, so we couldn't fund all of them. But these are the ones we felt were most critical moving forward in phase 1, and you'll see that there are 7 positions on that list for phase 2 as well. So that's a very quick and dirty overview of this. I'm sure that faculty members are sitting here trying to place these in their departments. I have no doubt about that. But before we leave it, I want to make sure you understand something about this. It's a huge opportunity to be able to hire this many people at one time. Huge opportunity. Nobody's out there doing it, with maybe the exception of 1 or 2 schools. And to have that opportunity to be able to hire this many faculty at one time is going to require huge investment of the Institute to do it. I'm not talking about dollars here. I'm talking about searches and efficiency of searches and recruitment of the very best people to get into these positions, getting it done efficiently without burning up everybody's day in the number of searches that are going to happen here. So we got to think strategically about how we do this. That's the next era of this. And I intentionally, he didn't know I was going to do this, put Ron's picture up there because he's going to have to make it happen. But it's going to require tremendous effort on the part of our faculty and our staff and the whole community of people in IANR to make this successful. So we want to go into it the right way. We also know we've got to resource it right. When you bring in 10% more tenure track faculty than what you started with 18 months ago, there are support needs for those additional people that are going to have to be part of this equation too, whether that's in startup of those faculty and ensuring they can be successful, and in staff support. So we're going to have to think through that very carefully and resource that appropriately. And I just thought it would be helpful for you to see the numbers. 19 we're currently recruiting. 36, there's 2 more I didn't show you today that we'd already committed to fill that weren't on these lists. There were 34 I showed you, and there's 2 more we'd already committed to fill as part of attrition. And then 29 that are listed in these phase 2 positions. That's a huge, huge opportunity that I know we'll capitalize on, and I'm looking forward to. Now, just in closing, I want to make a couple comments about this community issue. I showed you this slide in February. It's not a new one. And it's about the opportunity for us to grow some new community resources, both here on campus, and there aren't ones shown off campus, but ones off campus as well. We have things like an East Campus Rec about ready to start. We have discussion actually about whether we might want more residents living on East Campus in the new master plan development that's underway currently. We are thinking about a different entrance to our campus here on East Campus. Haven't had one in a long, long time. We might want to make a different entrance to the campus that'll be more of a signature. Some of you may have seen what they've done downtown with the south entryway to campus on our street just in the last few months. We are thinking about whether there's opportunities for additional leveraging of resources across Holdridge Street in those new developments that are going to go up on Valentino's and where the AGR house is now underway and so forth. There's opportunities there. We are evaluating whether to put a hotel in one of those for faculty and visiting scientists and students, and that our students run it and make that part of our program. And the numbers are looking pretty reasonable for us to do that. We're thinking about that. So, those are community building kind of things that I think are going to make a big difference for us. Don't take those too lightly. Be part of that discussion. If you think we're way off in Never Never Land, let us know. But those are, we think, opportunities that will help us move forward. Friday, one of the pictures you may have seen coming into the room today was about the ceremony we had on Friday at noon. That wasn't a real public thing. It was meant to be really private for the families of these 4 people. Nebraska is the only state in the country, except Iowa, that has had 4 or more U.S. Secretaries of Agriculture from this state. J. Sterling Morton, it's the pencil etch that you see on the left, founder of Arbor Day in Nebraska City, was the 3rd Secretary of Agriculture in the late 1800s, 1893 to 97, I believe. Clifford Hardin, Hardin Hall, Chancellor of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Ag Secretary under President Nixon in the late 1960s, early 1970s, was Ag Secretary. Clayton Yiter, who was part of that group on Friday night and was here on campus in Ag Econ and other places giving seminars late last week. From Eustis, Nebraska, was Ag Secretary under President Bush, first President Bush, U.S. Trade Representative under President Reagan, and then, of course, Senator Johans, that we know more recently as Ag Secretary under George W. Bush, and now our U.S. Senator, one of our U.S. Senators from Nebraska. We asked friends of these folks if, on the anniversary of the Morrill Act, they would help us raise money to put something in their honor on our campus. And they each raised $50,000 or more for artwork to commemorate the service of these 4 people to our state and our country in a greater way. And those are kind of etchings of the ideas. We talked with it, had them unveiled on Friday, and there will be statues placed on campus here. Don't know where yet, have to go through the aesthetics committee to figure that out. But here on campus in their honor, in a way that we can add future Ag Secretaries to that display as we go down the road. Those might seem like kind of silly things, but they're really not. Those are important things that build community and understanding of who we are and what we do and why we do it and the heritage that's behind that. I want to put a plug in for the Human Lectures in closing. Judy is over here somewhere, right to the side. Judy, your picture's up there. And that's a means of saying thanks to Judy, because she helped make this happen in the last year as we built the Human Lectures effort. She's the one doing all the work and making all the details happen on a day-to-day basis. And we had a huge and successful year in launching that last year. And this is the docket for this year. 2 World Food Prize laureates coming to our campus. Temple Grandin, who's world acclaimed in the animal welfare, animal rights arena. Kim Anderson, who Lillian's been involved with, and others in the Yiter Fellows Program. We're jointly hosting a lecture with him here in November. Pamela Ronald and Ro Adamchuk from UC Davis in the plant biotech area, husband-wife team, who are coming in February for the lecture. Great lineup from faculty. We asked faculty to give us this, a committee that many of you were on, to help us form that lineup, and we're looking forward to a great year ahead. And again, thanks, Judy, for all you've done to make that so successful. And then this is my last slide. You know, we also need to remember that people have lives. Balance in our life. We talked about that. We all run 3 sheets to the wind. My wife tells me I do that far too often. But we have lives that we lead. Paul, many of you recognize Dr. Black here, has been in the hospital this past week. He's undergoing some health challenges, and I'm sure he and Conchetta would appreciate your thoughts. They don't know what's wrong yet, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but he's facing a challenge in his life, and it's a community of people that surround us that help us get through our challenges, and I'd ask you to keep him in your thoughts and prayers, he and Conchetta and their family. He would like to have been here today. He emailed me before this started saying, "Can I see the positions?" And I said, "Ron sent them to you." And then this little girl, some of you may have heard the story about the bus accident at Blue Hill last month. This is part of our family. Some of you will know Mark Tallman. Mark is a geneticist. He's a longtime friend. That was his daughter. And they buried her at 10 years of age. He's a scientist at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center, a renowned world geneticist, part of our family. So keep them in your thoughts and prayers as well as they recover from a real tragedy. That bus accident touched 3 different people at the U.S. Meat Animal Research Center. There was a grandchild, there was a nephew, and there was a daughter and her sister. So it's not all about what we do at work, it's this too. Thanks for what you do, and we're looking forward to the growth. It's exciting times at the Institute as I recover my tears here. You know, we're doing important work. What we are going to do moving forward is exciting. I look forward to your engagement. Thank you what you do every day, and we're off on a journey ahead. Thank you very much. Now, I know that people have to go, but if there are questions, you know, we do have time to address questions for anything that you would like to ask, or that people online on the web stream might like to type in, and Jill will monitor those. So what can we address? Mark?
It's not a question, Ronnie. It's just a big thank you for your leadership for the Institute on all of the different things you're doing. I think we have a great future because of it. Thank you.
Questions? Yep, Tom?
Yeah, I'll second that. Thank you for your leadership and this great presentation. You've given us very comprehensive, clear, and heartfelt. Thank you. My question is related to positions. There was nothing regarding percentage of appointment, teaching, research, extension.
Yeah.
Has that been thought out? And could you just give a quick
So
overview?
the way that, Tom, the input came in, so we have a book for each of those positions where each position has been described in concept at this stage. So, and it does have an initial estimation of teaching, research, extension, appointment on each of them. What we will do now moving forward is we'll collectively go back to these clusters. So the same group of unit heads and district directors and people off the leadership team that were working with those cluster areas will now take that and move it into the next stage relative to position descriptions and searches and so forth. But we did analyze that in terms of appointments. So where those FTE would be. We did it, and relative to departments, we did it possible departments a position might go into as well. That make sense? Yeah. Good question. Yeah, Mike.
With the increase in the student body, how will we going
I told you she's.
You don't get too far off track, do you? With the projected increase in student body, how are the resources, the physical resources that are going to be necessary to service the increased number of students, particularly on East Campus, going to be addressed?
So Mike's question, to make sure everyone heard it, was with, and I'll just kind of call it generically all of the growth we're talking about, student numbers, faculty numbers, research, the whole picture. How are we going to address capacity issues, both in terms of physical infrastructure? We're addressing it people-wise here, but on physical infrastructure. Campus-wide, we are undergoing this master plan, reopening of our master plan currently. So that process started this summer. The master planning people were here just a few weeks ago on their fact gathering trip. They were with us here on East Campus as part of that. So they have this picture within that process. So they also were charged with, this is the number of increase in students we're looking at. This is what the master plan had been before. This process wasn't set to expire for another 2 years. We moved that forward because of this growth process in order for us to think through it out over the next 5 years. So that's primarily where it's being addressed, is to make sure we do it at that master plan level. Yeah, Jim. Jill? Kim and then Jim.
So one of the things that is really important in that whole master plan process is go online, click the My Plan button, and give your feedback, because apparently they're not getting very much just yet. And for them not to know what the constituency wants and needs means we will get a master plan that won't work.
Yeah, and I also should address, to go back to Mike's question, that'll address the campus side. It won't address, obviously, the off-campus side. So we also are looking at that strategically across the locations we have across the state. For example, at Panhandle, we know we have infrastructure needs at Panhandle relative to facilities that we're addressing, and we already have that allocated in our budget to address part of those needs there. Don Adams, who is immensely successful at figuring out how to grow, sitting over here, has needs for graduate students, actually to continue growing the graduate student abilities at West Central and North Platte. Just finished an expansion on their headquarters facility from an educational center perspective. So we're not only doing it on campus. I wanted to make sure you understood that we also are looking at those needs across our statewide campus as well. Jim?
I saw in your slides you had the planning process from basically 1 March to end of September for making phase 1 and phase 2 selections. Do you plan to do that annually, that process, or biennially in conjunction with settling on phase 1 and 2 already?
So we, as I described, we tried to do it comprehensively in this first phase. So we said, okay, out over the next 5 years, if we had a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, what would we do, right? And we included in that a little bit of thinking about what might happen over those 5 years. So what might our turnover be of people over the next 5 years, or what our best guess might be of that. So we did take that approach in coming to where we are currently. What we will have to do, though, is we go out through the next 18 months. We've got 19 on the table, and we're putting another 36 on the table. 18 months from now, we're going to see where we are. And in the course of that process, we're going to have some idea of how that progresses as well. I don't know that we'll get all these hired. I sure hope we do. But you never know how that might play out and how priorities might change over time. So we're certainly going to be readdressing and relooking at those as we move forward.
Hi, Diane Sullivan. I have a question about the staff part of it. You have the 36
Right.
Faculty coming in. Is there money also set aside for staff people to help with that? Or is that going to be just encompassed in what's here already?
I won't ask Jeff to stand up and address it, but I'm going to look at him hard. So that question came up last Wednesday night. So the way, I want you to envision this picture of the Dean's Council meeting. So this was, what was this after? International Day, I think? So we came in after that event on Wednesday, and we sat down to start talking about what to do with this book, with these 50 positions in it. We obviously had thought about it a lot going in. The first hour of the discussion was around the resource side, determining the number, how many were we going to release, were we going to be able to have that many searches at one time, and were there going to be resources available to assist with that? That was one of the questions we asked in the discussion. And so we always turned to Jeff and said, is there money in the till? And he always said yes. But on the staff side, that was yet another question. So you heard me say in that last slide, we have to plan for startup for the faculty, which we have done. So we know where those resources are and thinking about how we'll do that startup with them. And we need to do an analysis of what an additional 36 faculty is going to mean relative to staff support. So I think we're okay, and it is in the vision that we have to go back and think about where that fits relative to staff members.
Thank you.
Other questions? You've been a patient audience. I'm going to let you go. It's almost 3:20. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being online today. And like I said, it's exciting times, and we're looking forward to moving forward. Thank you.